Welcome back, everyone, to episode 7 of Finding Rachel. Okay, welcome back, everyone. Very excited about today's episode. We have a special guest to join us, David Donley, who's going to help me talk about the role of music and sound, editing and mixing, all that good stuff in documentary filmmaking. So stick with me. Make sure you hit subscribe if you haven't already. Hope you've been enjoying the content. So let's jump right into it. Let's hear from David himself. Here we go.
Well, I am David Donley, and I'm a professional musician and audio engineer, and anything to not have a normal job has been my sort of my mission, and I've managed it for the last 18 years. I'm the current guitarist in Visage, and I've done a lot of stuff with Bowie-related projects, and the Sex Pistols, The Cure, The Slits. Got my own bands, Venus Reaction, Choose Your Weapon, and Peaceful Cacophony. I've worked with Daphne Guinness, Tony Visconti, all that sort of stuff. Just generally, I've been a very, very lucky fella, And was it Bob Dylan that said, "If you can get up every day and do what you want, you're a success."
David, welcome. Thanks for joining the podcast.
You're very welcome.
All right. Anything you want to add to your bio? That was a great bio. I know earlier this morning you sent me a much longer bio. Maybe I can add that to the description when this gets uploaded to YouTube, because you have a very long and illustrious history and and career in the music industry.
It's been very varied. It's been a long and winding road, as one of the Beatles once said. But I think it's because I've most of my work has been a hired gun, if you like. So there's a lot of people that I've done a lot of things for. So yeah, when you asked me if I could do a little bio, I just kept remembering. Oh yeah, and that, and then that, and I've left a ton of stuff out and stuff, but. This if we were ever going to do a podcast on me, we could go further into it, but yeah, the bullet points were enough, I hope.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that, David. So, before we get into the topic of the day, which is music and film, which is, of course you're well versed in this, I wanted to just talk a little bit about the documentary film, the TV show, which of course is based on Rachel's Ghost. You're a guest. What you come up once every 2-3 weeks, something like that?
It's not a plan. I come up when I think, oh, I've got something to say about this, or I could join in, and I find so many of the mainly musical conversations that's the bit that that pulls me in, and I know it goes a little bit political and stuff, but yeah, that's not being in the UK as well. I mean, what am I going to say about it? I mean, if America wants to vote for a saran wrapped ball of sausage meat that looks like it's been kicked through a yellow cobweb as a president, that's
Wow, that's quite an image. That's quite an image there.
Yeah, I don't get it. I don't get it. But then again, believe me, I don't get the last 3 prime ministers we've had over it.
Yes.
But it's just one of
Yeah,
those.
maybe that's for another podcast, David.
Yeah,
Holy
I think so.
smokes.
I think so. Yeah, but
Just to let the audience know that David, not only does David pop up on Rachel's Ghost now and again, and of course has a really impressive background in the music industry, but I also interviewed him for the documentary. So David's one out of maybe 10 or 11 people who've been on Rachel's show or continue to be on Rachel's show that I interviewed for the documentary.
yeah.
And so I asked a good number of those 10 interviewees what they thought the story of the documentary should be. And I thought your answer was one of the most honest and compelling ones. Here, let's give it a listen.
Well, I think the story is about a woman who has gone through a lot of hardships and it's about a collection of people who've gone through their own hardship.
Yeah, I would still stand by that. And it's funny actually that one of the last conversation I had with Rachel, I was just saying about how the TV show, um, because I came through it via playing on the Project Gemini albums, and Mark was on Rachel's Ghost talking about his, and I thought, oh, I've got a single out. I wonder if she'd like to speak to me, And so it was a publicity thing, and I thought it was a vinyl show, I thought that's
Yeah,
exactly what it was, and now I've realised that it is a show about people who love music and environment, but it isn't. It's about the people who love vinyl and record collecting. Do you know what I mean?
absolutely.
That's
No, absolutely, and I think that's why
Absolutely.
I wanted to share that quote with the audience.
It's the same principle as, Jaws, for instance. It's not a film about a shark. It isn't. Even
It's
though
about
it's
the
called
shark's teeth.
Jaws, it's
What oh,
about, it's about the people around this event that's happened
got it.
on their beach and stuff like that. So I feel that Rachel's Ghost is, we I learned so much about certain records that are out and vinyl and stuff like that. There's all that going on, but it's also about this massive different personalities who all love the same thing or different things, or love different things in the same way, etc. It's I just find
Mhm.
it fascinating, and I just think Rachel and Sue are an amazing duo, and they run a very, very sort of difficult ship to steer sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's why I really kinda glammed onto this word here, hardships, right, that you repeated twice, because
Yeah,
I think it really does it captures the emotion, I think, of the Rachel's Ghost TV show, the investment that people have,
yeah,
and you're right, not just in vinyl, but in each other, in
yeah.
their positions, in their passions, and of course in their politics.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, with Rachel's story about how she's changed, how she went through that huge change. That, I mean, I can't imagine how hard that must have been. Although it was what she wanted to do, it must have been hard. And then there's Sue, who you can see they're still very much a couple that are in love, but I've never asked because it's not my business. But Sue's position must have been a little bit sort of, wow, okay, now what do I do? Sort of in that, and I that's amazing too. And I think
Well,
also, I think the Rachel's Ghost panel, if you like, it's really good that we're all pretty cool with ourselves. I think like sort of Mazzy and Rob and stuff like that, but we've all had stuff happen to us. I mean, I'm still going through therapy because of I've got to use that stupid internet term now, haven't I? The unliving of a close friend of mine who I was in a band with, and it happened at the same time as I lost three other people, and I just went to bits. I had a complete breakdown. I didn't play music for a long time, and much better now, but I'm still I'm still affected by it. So, although I do believe in myself as a fairly happy-go-lucky guy who just can't believe his luck in terms of what I've managed to do for a living all these years, it doesn't stop you getting a really good kicking every now and again when life decides to, hand one out
thanks for that,
to you.
David. I think that that might be a jumping off point to talk about the main topic of today, which
Yeah,
is music, and music, of course, is very emotional as well. Music adds a well, a soundtrack,
yeah.
to a story. It's kind of
I'd say
cliched and
it's
everything, right?
entirely emotional, and
Yeah.
obviously you can pull on life experiences that you've had and relate them, to that, and but a lot of the time when I've worked on a film, the director will send me the rough cut, the time coded copy of the rough cut of a scene, and they'll explain that, right, the character is thinking this, but we don't know that yet. So I want something, quite, quite just normal, just some background music, but I'd like at some point for it to feel awkward. So then you suddenly go into
There's a
maybe,
lot of that in this film.
yeah, exactly. So then you
We'll
put
talk
in
about that afterward.
yeah, you put in sort of, a sharp in there where it shouldn't be, and it's like it doesn't. You sort of hear it, but you don't hear it. You just feel it more than that.
Yeah, yeah.
And
And I've been in that room too. Maybe we can kind of tease that out a little bit, right? So
sure,
you're sitting down. It's kind of a, what would you call that meeting? It's a meeting where the musician, the person who's going to score the film, make the film, sees the what's called a picture locked version
yeah,
of the film. So it's odd, right? It's a film that has all the dialogue and everything, but there's no music at all. But the director still has to edit that film along with the editor, of course,
yeah,
knowing that there needs to be some space for music, right?
yeah,
Knowing that the thing that they've just put together is going to be complemented by music.
yeah,
So the editor and the director need to make their own notes, need to be able to put into words what just as you were saying, David, just what the mood
yeah.
it is, just what they want the mood to be enhanced by music. Does that make sense?
Oh, it absolutely does. And that like I say, directors, if they're a good director, they've got a really good way of telling you what to expect. But with one,
I was just going to follow that up by saying sometimes it's, I don't know if you feel like this sometimes, that in music and sound, I find that that the vocabulary around music and sound is much more limited than the vocabulary around visual issues, right?
right, okay,
And
yeah.
that we often use visual words to try to explain what we mean by sound. David, can you add a little bit more color to that?
Absolutely.
David, can you make it a bit more violent,
Yeah, well, I absolutely. I mean,
harsh?
like I
You
say,
know,
I always feel embarrassed when I'm on Rachel's Ghost. I said this to her that I did. I end up name dropping all the time, but the trouble is, it's because of that is the job I've got. So I'm surrounded by other musicians and other people, and that's what I do. And I've always sort of said, if I was a plumber, I'd know loads of other plumbers and people who put windows in and stuff like that. But I don't, because I'm not one of them. So, but I did tell you a couple of things. Is I remember being in the studio with The Cure, and I remember Robert getting a guitar sound, and him saying to the producer Phil Thornley at the time, um, I just I want it to be clean, but like blue rice falling down the tiles of the roof of a house.
faster but slower.
Yeah, yeah, that was a Martin Hannant thing, wasn't it, from
Yeah,
George?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, he said,
yeah.
"Yeah, faster
Just
but
the other
slower."
day. Yeah, yeah.
And I had a really brilliant bit of direction from Tony Visconti doing the Daphne Guinness album, because there was a bit of acoustic guitar, and I went into the booth, put my headphones on, and I knew the song, but I didn't quite know, because it was an acoustic guitar bit, and there's already two electrics on there that we'd done. I said to Tony, I said, "How do you want me to do this? Do you want me to sort of chug, 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 chug it, or do you want me to sort of, up, down, scrapey,
Mm.
scrapey sort of thing, or do you want me to arpeggiate it, or whatever? What do you want?" And just that brilliant voice that Brooklyn boy voice that Tony Visconti's got, and he just went, "John Lennon rhythm guitar, Dave. John Lennon rhythm guitar." And I immediately knew what he wanted. He wanted jing 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 jing. Up down up down up down up down, like a steady thing. What a brilliant description, John Lennon rhythm guitar, Dave. And
But he was using your language there, right, David? He was telling, and that also wasn't a film. So my
no,
question to you would be, when you had that meeting with the for the film project that you were just talking about, that
yeah.
kind of cribs notes, how extensive were those directions to you about, during this scene I want scary, this scene I want creepy, like, in other words, the reason why I'm asking that is I want to know how much creative input you had in that process.
Um, Well, I mean, there was a couple of times where I sort of phoned the director and said, "I know you want it to be like this, but watching the footage, that I don't feel this. I feel like this is this is actually quite fun or something, you know. And I'd say, can I not make it a bit more jaunty? Because the next scene is going to be really, really sad. um, Basically, the heart of the film was about this guy that had lost a greyhound dog. He'd had his greyhound dog stolen, and these villains it's set in 1977, and they were racing it on a dog track. So the director paid for me to come down to Doncaster and watch the filming of the dog racing sequences. And because it was set in the 70s, when I got there, I've never experienced anything like it, because all the cars, they spent 11 grand on cars just for a day, because they were all 70s cars, you know, and
Yeah.
the,
Yep.
all the extras there, it was mad. The costume department was incredible. I mean, I'm a child of the 70s. So for me, it was beyond strange. But I understood straight away that she wanted me to get the vibe. She wanted me to
Got it.
know what it felt like, and when everyone's cheering for the greyhounds and all that sort of stuff. And I went home after that and immediately wrote the music to that sequence, because it was
Mm.
going through my head while I was watching, you know?
Yeah.
So that
So that immersion in that kind of
yeah,
soundscape
yes,
helped you compose it the next day.
exactly.
Okay.
And
Yeah. The other question I had was around, again, because you have this picture locked product film kind of
yeah,
delivered to you, and these are there are certain instructions that are given, and certain moods that are expected of the person who's making the soundtrack. But as a musician, of course, you're in full control as let's say you're a sole composer
yeah,
of also the pacing of the music, and pacing is incredibly important for film,
yeah,
right? Because in fact, I would say that the editing itself, even before the music comes along, that is an incredibly important technique and part of filmmaking, is carrying the audience along, setting the tempo, the rhythm, the beats, all these things that we can find a vocabulary that comes from music. So did you find that frustrating, that the pacing of that product, that media product, was kind of baked in already before it arrived on your desk?
um, I don't know. I don't think so, because, like I say, I was in for this particular film we're talking about, which eventually came out as Dusty and Me. Um, but this one, I was in. The guy that pulled me in initially was the guy that had written the screenplay, the treatment for it, and it was based on, I think it was his uncle's life. Is it? So it's like from a true story, you know.
Mm.
And
This film won't be a true story. This will
no,
be made up.
no, absolutely, yeah.
It's that it's all made up, right?
And so I was lucky that I was right in at the beginning, and there was lots of sort of, afternoons in the pub in Soho in London, just talking about, the atmosphere and all that sort of stuff. So I must say it was a bit of a water birth of a film, to be honest, in terms of what I needed to do, because, it was a comedy, and it had some sadness and some melancholy. It had some fear, and I felt I knew what I needed to do. The hardest job I've done was my first film job, with a film called Silver Lining, which had to change its name to Claude and the Cloud, because there was before it came out, someone else put out a film called Silver Lining. But anyway, Claude and the Cloud. It was a small thing. It was just it was a stop animation thing. Um, and but the weird thing about this as my first thing is it had no dialogue whatsoever.
Mhm.
It was stop animation. It was about this little fella who'd got a 50s style cafe, and he had no customers, and you know he makes friends with a cloud. Yes, I know. But the thing is, the music had to go through the whole thing. And, when he was happy, I had to make it chirpy. And when he put a record on the jukebox inside, I had to do a little 50s thing. Then he heard a noise upstairs, and he walks very slowly up the stairs, and I had to make that
Mhm.
sort of thing. and then he sees something that shocks him. So I then had to suddenly go for a very fast Tom and Jerry type sort of.
So in many ways you were kind of a character, or the music rather
Absolutely. If you took
played
the
a
music
role,
away,
right?
you probably wouldn't get the full gist of
Nonsensical.
the sense of it. So pacing on that one was very, very important because, you had to set the scene really. It was very well animated and great. And I mean, one of my greatest joys or memories really is we went to the BFI, which is the British Film Institute in London. The big place, as it were, and watched it in 5.1. And I think that's where I got my love for it, because it was just it was a friend who just asked me if I'd do it, and I said, yeah, I'll have a go. But to sit there and hear that, like my music
in the
just
cinema,
coming through,
yeah.
I mean, it was really, I thought, wow,
Yeah.
I'd like to do more of this. I really would.
So fabulous. Yeah, I remember the first time this during my last film, the Canadian delegation, that I hired someone to score the film, and listening to it in a cinema when it was totally complete. And I said to the band, the folks, the guys who made the soundtrack, I said, this is the best thing about the film. I was just blown away. And you're right, hearing it in a cinema too.
Yeah. I mean, I
I don't.
do, as a musician, and as anything I do, I do suffer quite badly from imposter syndrome, in that I never know why. I've been on stage so many times and just thought, how did I get here? I'm not that good. Do you know what I mean? I've always had that
Yep.
that feeling. So it was, I suppose, those sort of moments, they're just lovely, because you sit there and I'm not proud of yourself. I wasn't patting myself on the back, but I just thought, yeah, it worked. I did it, that sort of thing. And you think,
And then a year later, you're thinking, how did I ever do that?
yeah, exactly.
That's
So
my imposter syndrome moment. It's kind of, wow, actually that wasn't so bad, that film. Now, can I do it again? Only maybe a little bit better?
yeah.
Or even if I did it as good as that one, I'll be pretty happy, because that's not bad actually.
Exactly.
Just shifting gears, but maybe kind of building on some things that you just said there, David, about that last film, when the music was a character, so to speak, or it ran all the way through the film.
Yeah.
There are also moments where you shouldn't have filmed. In fact, excuse me, a lot of moments where you shouldn't have music, that it needs to be quiet or silent. There are a lot of times where their music can be overused.
Yeah.
And do you have any experience with that part of the process?
Definitely. In Dusty and Me, there was a scene where he is sat at the table with his mother, the main character, and basically he's got a brother who his dad thinks is great because he's a footballer, he's this, that, and the other. Whereas this character, that's the main character in this, Dusty, he's a chess player, and he reads, he was reading newspapers at the age of 7 and stuff like that. And his dad thinks that's a bit sort of wet, that sort of thing. And so there's a scene where his mother says, "Oh, your dad gave you this for your birthday," and it's like this horrible jumper or something like that, And I did some music for it, but I put a note to the director, and I just said, in my opinion, I don't think you should have music on this. I think we should have music as he walks into the house, sits down, hugs his mum, and then I think it should cut, and she should just say, "Your dad sent you this," and just have it stuck. And then he says goodbye to her and walks out, and that's when I then brought in some strings and some sort of like type music,
Kind of transition or
Yeah,
end of scene music.
and they agreed with that. And by the way, I ought to just point out that Dusty and Me ran into some. There was some all sorts of problems. Once it was all filmed and edited and stuff, there was a load of problems, and it sat in the archive for about 2 years. And I never heard anything again. And then I suddenly saw an advert for it on DVD, and they'd basically got a different composer who did a lot of TV stuff for the BBC and what have you. And fair enough, a bit rude not to tell me, but I mean, they paid me anyway, so in a way, it's okay. I didn't lose anything, I suppose. They paid me for the work that I did, but you know, I was a bit sad that I don't really know why they decided not to
Yeah,
use.
yeah. We talk a lot about we hear a lot about people being interviewed or lots of scenes that are cut from films, but we don't talk as as film lovers, as cinema goers about as much, nowhere near as much about what was cut out or changed
Yeah,
in the music, do we?
no.
Very rarely. Anyway, I've got one last thing before we wrap up, David, and that is, well, we've been talking. Thank you so much again for this conversation. It's been
Oh, you
really
know me. I could talk for
very,
hours.
very helpful. Very, very helpful. I hope the helpful for the audience too of the podcast to know a little bit more about what's coming up in the
Mm,
making of the TV show, the documentary. But why don't we finish on that? What do you, when you think about the Rachel's Ghost TV show? You know the characters, you know
yeah.
the hosts, excuse me, and the producer. So, given all that we've talked about, do you have any advice for me? Any sense as to what kind of a soundscape, what kind of music might fit a documentary like this? This is a hard question, and I didn't send you this question before, did I?
It is.
I'm putting you on the spot.
Well, obviously, I've already given it a lot of thought, and I
Mm,
know that you know the music has to reflect the show itself. So it's you know there's going to be some aggressive shit. Sorry, am I allowed to say that? Sorry.
sure.
There's going to be some aggression. There's going to be some you know some melancholy, I'm sure. But I mean I've not seen a rough cut. You've not even sent me my interview. You know, so I know nothing of what's coming up. But
Secretive,
but
so secretive.
yeah, exactly. But I've already, if you request them, of course, I have a theme for Rachel and a theme for Sue.
Mm,
Rachel's sounds a non-copyright infringing Beatle-esque type sort of thing. When
uh-huh.
she's just chatting, if that's very low, if you need that as a bed underneath what she's having, and I always
You
see
have
Sue.
been thinking about
And
this,
I always
yes.
see Sue as just so classy, and so she's got some kind of beautiful strings and a beautiful string theme, really. If you speak to her on her own, like I say, I don't know what you filmed, but in my head, I'm thinking, right, solo Rachel interview, solo Sue interview, waxed. You know, I mean, waxed. I just, I immediately thought of something that was along the lines of of Pantera or something like that, you know, because waxed is just a force of nature. I think once you've edited, once you've got a rough edit, you'll probably be able to say, Here's what." Maybe you'll send me one, and I'll be able to say, "All right, I know what to do." On the other hand, you might just want you know talking heads, and that's enough.
Mm,
Um, but I imagine there's quite a lot of B. You must have shot a lot of B roll, I would have thought. So you'll need
yeah, a
something
good amount. Yeah.
over there, and it might be jaunty, it might be whatever it is. I mean, you filmed it,
I always feel like less is more to a degree. You
yeah,
know,
yeah.
I have always really enjoyed more minimalist sounds and piano.
Oh yeah,
I
oh yeah,
don't know why. That's the conservative in me, that being a bit more cautious about overstepping what we're seeing and what we're hearing, because you're right, there is a lot of dialogue in the film.
yeah,
There's a lot of
absolutely,
talking heads,
yeah,
and that's something that I've been thinking about a lot, about how to embrace that as opposed
yeah.
to make excuses for it, right?
And just like the show, you know,
Mhm.
there are some episodes of the TV show that I'm just transfixed for the full 3 hours because it's interesting. They've got some great people on and all that sort
Yeah,
of stuff.
don't distract me. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Whereas
yeah.
if you know, there are certain people in the chat that if they're on one of that sort of thing, I'd rather be awake during surgery, quite frankly. And I have to go and do something else because it's just you know, but not very often. I have to say it is. It's a small time that I can usually cope with it. But it is. It's a program of extremes. So I'm quite ready to do extremes of music. And as you were saying about the themes, I'll just say one more thing: is that I
Mm,
am currently working on a cinema film, but I'm not allowed to say anything about it. However, the main character, I gave her a theme, a very simple, just a few picked notes. But what I've done is every time you see her doing something, whether it's happy or it's sad, the tune is the same, but
Yes.
it's in a different style.
Yeah.
So there is one where I just basically play those notes on a piano with a lot of reverb and a lot of delay on it, and that's that. She's thinking about something. She's reflecting on a time, and then there's another scene where she's running. So you've got the same theme, but it's just twice as fast, same notes,
Hmm.
and there's a bit of distorted guitar in there
I
and that sort of
hadn't thought
thing.
about that. Yeah, it's a bit of the kind of the James Bond kind of use of
Yeah.
music,
You know
right?
what
And
we
the
haven't
James Bond
mentioned?
theme, you know.
Yeah.
But you're right. You're right. I hadn't thought about this. This is a very helpful conversation. Is that this is a very character driven film? I think
Yeah.
there's community and there are characters,
Yeah.
and so you're
And
right. There's
one thing
certainly
we've not
something there.
mentioned actually, which I think is
Mm.
important because it's quite rare, but it really works when it works, is films that have no music but just have sounds. And my immediately in my head, I'm just thinking Eraserhead and Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which
And which one makes more sense to you?
well, they don't have music, do they? They don't have music. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, they had things like they were dragging a violin bow across a saw, and so it would just go, yeah, that horrible metallic that
Mm.
keeps happening, and all that sort of stuff. Horrible noises. And with Eraserhead, it's that mechanical sort of. There's all these sort of mechanical noises, but
And so
music.
on YouTube, what kind of native sounds do we have? Right, we have some glitching sounds. Perhaps
Yeah.
we have Melody, one of the characters who comes up, one of the guests on the Rachel show, who has a very booming voice. He
Oh
comes in,
yes.
and so that there are some native sounds that I think would certainly amplify
Yeah.
and point to certain dynamics for the audience. Absolutely, you're totally right, David.
Yeah, yeah, and it is you take in all those things like like I say, I know, I hope we're not going off topic here, but we did. I felt I love Melody. He's a good guy, but I felt really bad because I put my foot in it and tried to explain to him that it's not the volume, it's the frequency of his voice, and it's funny actually. Last night I was watching the news, and I always have my television going through my hi-fi setup, through the speakers and stuff. And there was a brand new newsreader on there that I've not seen before. And whenever it's the first time it's ever happened watching television through my speakers, every time she said anything with the ooh sound in it, like fool or you know who or anything like that, it made my speakers rattle. And it's not the volume; it was
Was
because
that a good thing? Do you like having your speakers rattled, David?
no, it became annoying.
I would agree.
But it's just weird because this woman
And your
clearly,
neighbors
again,
maybe would agree too.
it's
Yeah.
just frequencies. It's just every
Yeah.
time she said that syllable, as it were, the frequency
Well,
was different.
maybe that's part of each quote unquote character's sonic profile then,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Is and
absolutely.
that's something to play with. So I think that the truth of someone, if that's the right word, someone's voice
Yeah,
and by extension someone's character can be amplified, can be edited, can be remixed in and through sound and music. I think that would be a fabulous idea, right?
yeah.
Anyway, we're kind of getting into kind of a work phase here, but maybe we should try to wrap things up here because I see we're past the 30-minute mark. But
We will, and I'll
go ahead,
just add
David,
my very last thing is that
please.
I've been asked and I've just finished doing an audio book
Mm,
which by an author called Remy Capo, and it's got three basic chapters in it. One set in West Africa, then the Caribbean, and then England. And the publisher asked me if I could do little bits of music to introduce that this is where the story is going. So very quickly. I just had to think, right, West Africa, okay. So I went for drums. It's set in 1750 as well,
mhm.
so it had to be time appropriate. So I went for West African drumming. For the Caribbean, I initially just thought lazily. I thought about steel drums or steel pans, as they call them, And
Yeah.
I thought, no, everyone does that. Caribbean, it's always steel drums. And I thought, But then I sort of researched it a bit and realized that they make a lot of music back then by blowing in conches, different sized conches and stuff. So I built up a bit of music that sounds really Caribbean because of the conches used in that. And in England, I just, we weren't really much further than flutes and stuff and wind
and bad beer,
that sort of thing. So again, even on an audiobook, which is 99% someone just speaking, sometimes music can just add the atmosphere for the next chapter.
Absolutely. Wonderfully put, David. Thank you again so much for agreeing to join me here on Finding Rachel.
Anytime.
We'll be seeing and hearing more from David in the near future.
Yes.
Talk to you soon, David. Take care.
I'll be either hiding in the shadows on Rachel's Ghost every day, or I'll pop up every now and again and show some records that no one else is interested in.
Fabulous. Thanks, David. All the best.
Take care. See ya.
Bye now.
Yes, they knew I'd be standing naked, and with the old duds now gone, I can come clean. This was not an ode to clothes or prose that's sacred. Babe, this whole thing was just a dirty trick to make you think of me naked. Seriously, though. Call me.